Now, intrinsically, as human beings and historically, we've always been storytellers. In fact, as a public speaker, I have attuned to the delivering of a message wrapped up in a story of some sort. It's more interesting to talk about a reishi mushroom from the historical point of view in the framework of a story than it is just to tell of the scientific breakdown of something, right? We're interested in the nuances and the archetypes of things more so than we are of just the scientific iterations of something. And in that, we intrinsically tell stories about ourselves. We refer back to ourselves, sometimes in a second or third person, from an observational standpoint, and usually it's rooted in some kind of negative outline, some kind of narrative that's guiding our behavior from a place of past tense reference. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes we take our past stories and then we put them into our present, and then that creates the bedding of our future. Our future experience is always created from the present moment, but it's not that we are presently creating our future. It's that oftentimes we're creating our life from a past tense. One foot in the past, one foot in the future, and we're never really balanced in the present moment. And the present moment, again, not being attached or associated to a past story. And if you look back on your life, as I do quite often, sometimes I wonder myself, how did I get here? This is pretty remarkable. When I look at my life in retrospect as if a movie reel, and I look back and now I can see how serendipitous, how synchronistic things aligned, not through logic, and oftentimes not even through strategy, but through grace. Things just wove together at the perfect time. I met the perfect person, the right conversation took place, and it created an opportunity where without that synchronistic event, that never would have been possible, at least not in the way that it happened. And then I stepped into it through grace, through the Creator's deliverance of an opportunity, and then new things came about. So the point is very simple, but it's an interesting one to unpack nonetheless, is that I love what Tony Robbins says. When you're trying to get to the root of something, you finally are sick and tired of being sick and tired. You're no longer willing to tolerate present circumstances. You get to this place where you want to divorce the story and marry the truth. I want to say that one more time. Divorce the story, marry the truth. I've been doing a lot of inner engineering lately. I've taken a step back from the social media world and all the obligations that I had created in my story of who I am, what I'm doing in the world, what my role is, the endless iteration of all these storylines. And I've been distilling it down to the core, to the root. I want to know, what is the truth? Once and for all. Any kind of story that somebody has that is infringing upon their ability to innovate in their life, their ability to create progress in their life, is rooted in a core fear of some sort. And without going into the details of what I excavated outside of myself, I came up against a core fear that when I traced it back through the back trajectory of my life, I realized on some level this fear has always been present within me. And the fear rippled out into behaviors that at one point I thought were insecurities. I thought they were my fear of criticism or my fear of not being good enough and things of this nature. And on one level of consciousness that was true. But as I went even further down, I realized that it wasn't that really. Those were still stories, right? Those weren't core intrinsic fears in and of themselves. They were the story manifestation of what was underneath the radar. And for me, that was actually abandonment. at the core of it, fear of being abandoned. So in that you would possibly develop preservation defense systems that, if you were afraid of being abandoned, you would abandon somebody. You don't think of it like that because I come from compassion most of the time, but on some level that the residue of that fear of abandonment is still there. So I don't really put myself out to the extent that I know impossible. I don't really express the conviction of the things I believe in, and I don't really build a platform for myself and a public, I guess you call it persona or something like that, a public brand, and I don't really fully commit to it to the point where I let go of that fear of abandonment, right? It's a very deep thing that comes about in your consciousness when you start to distill down the branches of the tree that go to the root of the fruit, and it's wrapped up in some kind of fear, some kind of story you have about yourself, some kind of story you have about your circumstances, why the same things repeat in your life, why the same things seem to occur, why the same people show up in intimate relationships. All these things are a holographic reflection of the core architecture that is within each one of us, that's built and creates our personality construct, what we believe is true or not true in the world. And that's why now I just pretty much take the position of entertaining all possibilities, but believing nothing, or believing in very little, but entertaining all possibilities, because that allows me to release out of my straitjacket of the mentally generated or manufactured story I created to protect myself from uncertainty, right? The fear of uncertainty, which is really the greatest gift that we can ever have in our life, is that it's all uncertain. There's really no certainty outside of what our mind likes to construct as a certain situation. Your bank account, your relationship, your health, all those things are subject to change, and therefore you can start to actually tell yourself a new story. But you have to go into the inner architecture. You have to go into your subconscious computer through modalities like meditation, transcendental meditation, using binaural beats while you're napping, consciously integrating things that happen in the middle of your day. This is why sleep is so important, and getting the right kind of sleep for you, because that's the time when we actually integrate the present conscious, the present day events that happen to us. We need to integrate those things in a modality that takes the conscious mind out of the equation and allows us to open up to the more subconscious, more dormant aspects of ourselves, so we don't keep running the same storyline all the time, because the story that we have about ourselves is generating the behavior characteristics that we operate under. On some level, our operations, our personality, our habits, our behavior, what we believe is true about ourselves and our place in the universe is based on a story, and the story is based in some kind of fear. So that's a basic idea. I encourage you to investigate for yourself what kind of fears are behind the storyline that I'm operating under, and then to take that a step further, tell yourself a new story. I mean, geez, it's a very simple concept. It's not necessarily an easy one, but whether it's easy or not becomes irrelevant when your back is up against a wall and you're no longer willing to tolerate your circumstances that you created. Like Walter Russell said, the great mystic, mediocrity is self-inflicted, genius is self-bestowed. You have to give yourself permission to assume the greatest version of yourself, and that starts by telling yourself a new and more empowering and self-accountable story for why you're at where you're at in your life. You have to know the truth. You have to know why you are where you're at. But then moving forward, you have to innovate a new directive, a new narrative for your life, so you're no longer rooted in fear. You can now plant the seeds of compassion and unconditional love that will blossom into a beautiful story, and then that can blossom into a beautiful life.